Hey, thanks for dropping by the channel again. My name is Tauscher. I'm broker owner at Rover Realty in Mesa, Arizona. And with this channel, I'm looking to share with you the good, the bad, and the ugly about living in Arizona, whether you already live here or you're thinking about making the move to Arizona. Today, we're going to talk a lot about new builds. If you have spent any time in Arizona, you know that we have tons and tons of new builds. And let me tell you, I love my new builds because going to see new builds is like a field trip for women. It is like Pinterest live and in person on steroids. But there's a few things to know about our Arizona new builds that I want to make sure to share with you so that if you're going to look for kicks and giggles, because that's usually where it all starts, and then you fall in love, you know what you need to know before signing a contract. So we have a saying in our office that goes like this: friends don't let friends look at new builds without Rover checking them in first. And here's why. Builders have wonderful staff. They have a beautiful product, but at the end of the day, their salespeople only represent the builder. And some people think, well, you know, if I don't use a realtor, then maybe I'll get a deal or I'll get a discount or I'll get some incentive. And here's the thing, you don't at all. And most of the builders in Arizona have a rule that if your realtor does not sign you in the very first time you go look at the place, then you are not allowed to use a realtor for the transaction if you do fall in love. And that's a no-go. Here's the thing, you need us for two very important reasons. Number one, we represent you. The builder salespeople are so nice, but they only represent the builder and the builder's financial interests. And then number two, resell. Let me tell you, as I go into this video, I'm going to talk about multiple ways that as a realtor, I can help you with resale factors before you even build the house. And I know this sounds crazy because this is my new build. I'm never moving. Well, life happens, and whether you stay there for 20 years or something comes up and you have to move 2 years later, it's really important that we help walk you through a few steps so you kind of know what you're getting into. And heaven forbid, if you do have to move again in a short period of time, you have some excellent resale advantage. So let's get into new builds and talk about what that entails in Arizona. So I already mentioned that the very first time you do need to go with your realtor. And listen, I know sometimes you just want to go look for fun, but at the end of the day, all you have to do is text us the name of the builder and where it's at. And a lot of the builders, especially for those of us that we sell a lot of new builds, will often just they'll let us check you in by, phone or email. Once in a while, we do have to actually go in person and sign you in, but we don't have to ruin the fun. I mean, I guess I could bring snacks and drinks, but no, really, all we have to do is go in and sign you in, and then you spend all the time you want perusing the new build, looking at, the beautiful staging and how they did that feature wall and how that would work in your current home, which drives my husband crazy. That's why he doesn't like me going to the new builds, but it doesn't take but a few minutes. And hey, if you never buy a new build, no big deal. Didn't take but a moment for my time to make sure that you were protected. But if you do fall in love, here are some things that you need to know. So one of the first things I like to really make sure our clients know before they sign on the dotted line is that builders expect what's called a deposit. Now, it's not very different from our resale world where you do an earnest deposit, but it is a little different in that the builders set that deposit amount, and it could be anywhere on a lower end home, maybe $3,000, $5,000, all the way up to I've seen deposits of upwards of $100,000. And what you need to know about this deposit is if anything happens throughout the build time until you're ready to close, when I say anything, I mean a death, a job transfer, a divorce, you no longer qualify because somebody lost their job, whatever happens, and you have a deposit with that builder and if you cannot close on that new build, you have made a lovely donation to the builder X. Because even though once in a blue moon you might hear somebody saying, oh, in a rare situation they got their deposit back, I'm going to tell you it's far and few in between. Before we get you into a contract with the builder, builder, we need to make sure that, heaven forbid, something happened, if you had to walk from that home before it closed, that you could live with the loss of that deposit. Remember, they don't care if you lost a job or somebody died or whatever that might entail. Unfortunately, that's just the name of the game. And in this last year, some people kind of got caught in that particular deposit situation, because when they first put in a contract with the builder, the interest rates were at, say, 3-4%, but as the build took longer than anticipated and it went well past the time they were supposed to have closed on the home, now the interest rates were at 6-7+%, and now all of a sudden that payment that was very affordable at 4%, they could no longer afford the monthly payment if they were to close on this home that has a 6.5-7% interest rate. And so we had a lot of people that had to walk and leave their deposit on the table. So that is part of our new build conversation. Now, before I get too far into this, I really should talk about new builds versus spec homes, because what I just mentioned create a lot of what we call spec homes. So throughout this video, when I'm talking about new build, what I really mean by that is it is usually started at the dirt lot phase. You're picking what home will go on that lot. You know, sometimes you'll get a pick depending on the builder and the price point of the home, but you're picking upgrades, you're picking if the builder lets you move it more to the left, more to the right, that kind of thing. And you have a lot more potential control over the items and the options for that home when it's a new build from the dirt up. Now, when I say spec home, a spec home is a home that, for whatever reason, the builder has this home that is almost done or fairly close to being done, that usually you do not get to pick really any options for the most part. If you're lucky, maybe some finishes right at the very end, but more often than not, a spec home is you get what you get, you don't throw a fit. And so, but there's the bonuses, incentives with going both ways. So a spec home often is somebody that started the home and for whatever reason, they could not close the home and they had to walk. So now the builder has this spec home inventory. Also, we are seeing more and more builders just do spec homes in general, where it's more of a production situation because they can build the homes faster because there's no customization, and they know that a lot of people moving here from out of state need a home that's ready to roll within the next month or two, and they want a new build, but they don't want to go through the arduous process of waiting for 6 months, 9 months, 14 months on their new build. Now, when I'm sharing this information with you, I personally have done 2 new builds in the last 5 years, and I tend to sell about 10 to 15 new builds a year every year, all the way from beginner price points on up to, we just closed a $1.5 million home last week. So we see everything at every price point and everything in between with that. Okay, I mentioned earlier resell. One of the biggest components about resell and making sure that I do my job for you is helping with the lot selection. Now, this may not seem like that big of a deal. I know, sometimes I get buyers that go, well, I just don't want a 2-story behind me, or I want to be directly across the street from the tot lot. But I am looking at a little bit bigger picture, and I am concerned about, okay, this lot backs up to dirt. What is going to be behind it when it's all said and done? Is it going to be another community? If it is, will that house butt directly up to this yard? Will there be a buffer between the two of them? Will it be a commercial setup? What's going back there? We need to know more information. Now, the builder will give you something called a public report, and the public report is really important to read because it's got a lot of information buried in that public report about what's to come down the road in future years. So you definitely want to pay attention to that, and I'm looking through that as well. But there's some other components to lot selection to keep in mind. First is, a lot of builders charge what's called a lot premium. So if that lot is more ideal for whatever reason, maybe it's a larger lot, it has mountain views, a water view, it's a corner lot, you'll typically find those lots are going to be more expensive. And then the interior lots, or the less attractive lots, sometimes will have no lot premium, or it will be significantly reduced. And that's something we really need to take a look at. Why is it an inferior lot? Is it going to back to commercial? Is it going to back to an arterial street? What and how could this lot selection affect the future resale of this home. For example, I always tell people, listen, the reason you need me with you is you do not want to be the Whataburger story. And what I mean by that is there is this community in Queen Creek that backs directly up to a Whataburger burger franchise. And you might not think, oh, okay, what's the big deal? But let me just tell you, when they first put up this Whataburger, the drive-through, it goes Whataburger, drive-through, someone's backyard, several people's backyard. And unfortunately, what those homeowners discovered is that the people going through the drive-through, they were loud, and the noise and the smell and everything else coming from that Whataburger became somewhat of a nuisance, and it was bothering their quiet enjoyment of their own backyard. And so initially they started with a 6-foot block wall fence, and then the block wall got taller. And then got taller. Then they added wood slates, and then they added some more. That wall is now at least 20 feet tall. And that obviously wasn't good enough, because now in several places throughout the drive-thru, there are signs nearly as tall as me that say, please be quiet, please turn off your radio, please roll up your window. The neighbors are trying to enjoy their backyard. Let me tell you, that is not the lot selection that you want backing up to a fast food place. Another component of resale is if you need to go to design center or not. So some of the builders, like I mentioned, if it's a new build, you may get package A, B, or C. And then other builders are what we call semi-custom, where you actually go to a design center. They have, it's basically like an interior designer set up to help you go, okay, well, if you like these kind of cabinets, then you should probably look at this kind of countertop, and therefore that correlates to this flooring. Well, as a realtor, one of my jobs is to go with you to design center and just help you with some guidance. I know what will typically go well when it comes to resale versus your taste, versus where to spend the money, where to maybe hold off on the money. For example, a lot of people want to do pendants over their island in the kitchen, and the builder is going to charge you probably $200 to $300 just to put the electrical in per pendant. So that starts adding up. But then it's another $200 to $300 for the actual pendant light. So often we find it makes a lot of sense to put the wiring and have that ready and plumb there, but then to go and purchase your own pendants after the fact and have someone else just actually install them. The other thing is, for example, with flooring, we know that it's going to be a significant upgrade if you want to change out the main living areas from carpet to a tile or a wood plank, for example. And we can give suggestions, but that is one of the best resale items that you can do for your upgrades, is to have a nice, consistent, non-carpet throughout the main living area. And that's where I'm there to help give you those suggestions and those ideas. The design people they're phenomenal. They do a great job of helping you pull it all together. But at the end of the day, they are not in the real estate world, and they don't know what is going to bring you the most bang for your buck should you have to resell, or the maintenance and upkeep of some of those items, and how that looks 5, 6, 7 years later, when and if you do have to do another update or you're looking to sell the home. Another thing to know about new builds is they often will give you incentives to use their builder. The other thing I am there to do is make sure that you're aware that you're entitled to get inspections. A lot of times the builders will not bring this up. They don't mention anything other than you have a 1-year warranty on a lot of the builder's product. However, we have many clients that prefer to do what we call a pre-drywall inspection, and then they do another inspection when the home is done, and then they will schedule with their inspector. This is a third-party inspector who has no skin in the game with the builder. They'll do that third inspection right before your 1-year warranty is up. And this is a really great thing to do, because then they can find things as you're going through the build process, make sure it gets corrected and done right before you close on the home. Whether you do the pre-inspections or not, one of the things we really can't emphasize enough is getting that final inspection done at your 1-year by a third-party inspector. I'll give you an example. I had a client that went from a very small condo to a ginormous, almost 4,000 square foot home, and his AC bills were just very expensive. And he thought, well, that must be because I went from a little house to a big house, and that's why my AC is so much higher. He just wasn't expecting it to be quite so high. Well, at his 1 year inspection time, really pushed him. He said, I don't know, I don't think I need to get a third-party inspection. That's something that I'm just like really will hammer on to get it done, because there's third-party inspectors. They'll go in the attic, they will take a drone to look up on the roof. They are looking at every nook and cranny that you living in the home every day often will not see, and that the builder is not going to come back through and re-inspect that for you. So he had the third-party inspection done, and sure enough, they discovered that the entire attic, the builder had forgotten to insulate it. And that's a big deal in Arizona. We need the attic insulated to hold the AC in, and therefore that's why he had such ginormous electric bills. The good news is he was able to go back, show that third-party inspection to the builder. They went in, they took care of insulating the entire attic, of course, but there was no questions asked. It was done while it was under warranty, so he didn't have to fight this years later if he was going to sell and then have to take on that expense himself. And we were able to show all of the electric bills over the last year, and they knew, because they're so energy efficient, what they should have been at, and they cut him a check for almost $3,000 for the overage of what he'd paid for the last year. So that third-party inspection was well worth the time and energy and the money. The inspections typically are about $500-600 to get that done, so that he could make sure his home was, secure, safe, sound, prepped, and ready. Not only his usage, but if he ever needed to sell the house, that would have been a very ugly big surprise. Now, I will usually have my clients actually still get pre-approved with an outside lender, just as a backup, just in case. The builders lenders, they work on a high volume, and they are often just kind of cookie cutter. They'll say, okay, if you fall in this box, then we qualify you. And they don't spend a lot of time and energy digging into your qualification when they first give you the green light at the beginning. We find that they usually don't really start digging into a whole lot of any of that until weeks before closing. And that can be a problem, because if they do discover something that now all of a sudden they say, oh, you don't qualify to buy this house, it's like 3 weeks before you close. And that can be awful. And now, again, remember that deposit I talked about? You might be losing that deposit, which is a no-go. So if we have an outside lender just triple check everything before you get qualified with the builder, that is just somewhat of a safety net that is really great. And often I've had many times where they've come in and just saved the day. But if you can use the builder's lender, you'll find a lot of times that they have either a rate discount of some form. So for example, a lot of the spec homes I was telling you about, they want to move those homes quicker than not. And so you'll see that they'll maybe offer, a much lower interest rate if you'll buy a spec home, because they want that one gone. If you're buying a new build, sometimes you'll see that they're offering, if you have to go to design center, they'll give you, additional money at design center. They will give you a lot of times closing costs. They'll take care of a good chunk of those, if not all of them. So there are really some great incentives about taking on the builder's lender, but there are some other steps to that we just like to proactively take, because we'd rather be safe than sorry. Now, I love all houses, resale houses, spec houses, new build houses. They all have their pros and cons. One of the nicest things about being in a new build community, however, is they are typically done in phases. And the earlier you are in that phase, you'll find that often the more equity that you make in the house by the time the community is completely done. And that's because you'll see that, for example, the home that you're purchasing, maybe the base plan is at $400,000, but then a couple months later, now it's at $410,000. And then it's at $415,000. And it just keeps going up and up until that community's done. As a matter of fact, it's not uncommon to then see that very same house in the last phase now have a base price of, $475,000, $480,000. And so that is just such a wonderful equity gain for people. If the earlier you are in a community, the better. Now, if you're going to design center for a new build, you'll want to keep in mind it's really common to see most buyers spend about 20% of the base price price in upgrades. So for example, in that $400,000 home, you'd be looking at another approximately $80,000 in upgrades for a home price at $480,000. And that's assuming that you didn't spend any money on a lot premium. So that is a good rule of thumb to kind of mentally calculate that when you see a certain price, that's not usually what the price is at the end of the day. Now, if it's your last home in your mind, or a 55 plus home is where we usually see this, that number is actually closer to 40%. So that's a big number to start tallying on top of that base price. But it's something to keep in mind and to know about as you progress through the process of buying a new home in a new community. If you think you're in the market for purchasing a new build, reach out, shoot me a message, whether that's going to be in the next 9 days, 9 months. I love touring new builds and I'd be more than happy to take a tour for you. If you're here in state, let's meet up and go check it out together. If you're out of state, I can put that on a YouTube link for you. Make sure you see the good, the bad, and the ugly about the community that you want to live in.